and loss sharing contracts and Sukuk structure in infrastructure financing. We are very honored to see and to welcome today Professor Kabir Hassan, Professor of Finance from the University of New Orleans, a very established and well-known academic in the sphere of finance and Islamic finance in particular. Before I give the floor to our esteemed speaker, I would like to invite the Managing Director of Agrofinmost project, Mr. Mikhail Shamil Orlov, to say a few welcoming remarks. Mikhail is also a chairman of the Russian-Egyptian Business Council. And I would also remind our request to switch off your mics. Yes, please. Yeah. Just a moment.
No, I think you can switch the mics yourself.
Yes, I'm doing that right now. Yeah. Okay. So, Mr. Mikhail Shamil Orlov, the Managing Director of Agrofinmost project, actually the umbrella project under which we're organizing today our seminar, and we're doing research in Islamic finance and related issues. And Mr. Shamil, please.
Thank you, Medina. Dear Professor, dear friends and colleagues, dear brothers and sisters, I would like to say at the beginning of this first session, a very deep thank you to our esteemed speaker, Professor Kabir Hassan. The reason why we are organizing this session and the work which goes around that came from a very large program established at the Institute of Law and Development in Moscow at the Higher School for Economics and Skolkovo universities to address a dramatic question, which is food security. I mean, eating is one of the basic rights of any human being on the planet. Part of addressing the question of food security is about infrastructure, about financing farmers, about guaranteeing that the food is available. So, first of all, we realized that the majority of importing countries but China are Muslim countries. And the second thing, the more we were digging into this dimension, the more we were realizing that there is a fundamental underlying issue, which is of ethical nature. And here we are, the crossroads made it a natural move towards Islamic finances because they address culturally a certain region which is in very, very strong need of food, but also about Sharia compatible principles, which basically would make, if applied more strictly, our world a better place. To do that, to promote that, we need to be very good at understanding the theory and at bridging the gap between theory and implementation. So it's an enormous honor, dear Professor, to have you help us learn more, do a better job, and all together make our world a better world. Bless you and thank you very much for helping us, supporting us, and teaching us.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mikhail Shamil. And now I'm honored to give the floor to Professor Kabir for your lecture and for your presentation. Please, you are most welcome.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Thank you, Shamil and Medina, for inviting me to give this lecture on infrastructure financing and the use of Sukuk in this process. So I have made a very long presentation, but I will try during my presentation cut it so that I can fit within the 45 minutes time slot that has been given to me. So, and I would request to, mute your microphone, please. So what I will do, I will have this presentation and the slides available to Medina, and anybody who wants to benefit from it, please contact her and she will be able to share this with you. So my presentation have several parts. So let me start with some basic of Islamic finance. So under the Islamic law, making money from money, such as charging interest, is usury and therefore not permitted. And wealth should be generated only through legitimate trade and investment in assets. And all forms of interest are forbidden. So I'm not going to get into theological debate, what is interest and what is not, what is riba, what is not riba. Moreover, investment in companies involved with illicit activities or goods such as alcohol, gambling, tobacco, armaments, and pornography is strictly off limits. Similarity between Islamic finance and socially responsible, ethical or green investing, since they are both based on principles of good behavior and common sense. So Islamic financial instruments have to be carefully structured so that the exchange involves goods for money or partnership shares for money over time. The Islamic financial model works on the basis of risk-sharing principle, and such contracts should be designed to avoid risk-free return and money from money, uncertainty, and gambling. So there are a few basic Islamic financial structure. One is Qardul Hassan with nominal rate equal to inflation rate. Therefore, the real rate of return is zero. So you cannot charge any interest on Qardul Hassan or called benevolent loan. Cost plus financing and deferred installment sale is called Murabaha. Is a form of credit facility which allows customers to purchase equipments and goods without having to take out an interest-bearing loan. So in this case, the bank buys an item and then sells it onto the customer on a deferred basis. Then we have an operating lease. Is a leasing agreement whereby the bank buys an equipment or productive asset for a customer and then leases it back over a period of time. The client's averse initial capital outlay. In some cases, the customer is able to buy the item at the end of the contract. We have a profit loss sharing Islamic income or revenue bond contract or Mudaraba, which offers specialist investment in which the project owner and the investor share any profit. It does not guarantee any fixed rate of return. Instead, the investor receives a share of the profit or bears the losses generated by the business venture. And the principal is paid in real terms at the termination of the contract. And then finally, we have investment partnership, or called Musharaka. It is a partnership in which profit sharing terms are agreed in advance and losses are pegged to the amount invested. And it is an equity participation or stock ownership contract. So Mudaraba and Musharaka are more like equity type contract, and Murabaha is more like debt type contract. So here are some financial statistics what's going on in the Islamic finance world, and it's coming from Islamic Financial Stability Report, which just came out recently. If you look at Islamic banking is about 73% of the world financial asset. Islamic capital market is about 27%, and Takaful is roughly 1%. Now, Islamic financial assets are not uniformly distributed all over the world. It's still concentrated in GCC region, about 45%. Middle East and South Asia is 26%, and South Asia is about 24%. And almost 91% of Islamic banking assets are concentrated in jurisdiction where Islamic banking is of systematic importance. That means Islamic finance has penetrated the market more than 10%. Islamic banking is considered as systemically important in 13 IFSBC jurisdiction. IFSB stands for Islamic Financial Services Board. About 84% of the Sukuk outstanding, 78% Sukuk issuance in 2019, were in jurisdiction where Islamic banking is also of systematic importance. Now, if you look at the sector composition of global Islamic financial services industry, as I said, 72% Islamic banking, 1.1 takaful, Islamic funds about 4.2%. Islamic funds, I'm talking about this Islamic stock market, mutual fund, and so on. We have the Sukuk is about 22.3%. Now, out of the Sukuk issuance in 2019, 56% of these are sovereign Sukuk. That means those Sukuk are issued by the government. 36% are corporate Sukuk issued by the corporations. And also multilateral organization like World Bank, IDB also has issued Sukuk about 8%. If you look at the issuance type and jurisdiction, Malaysia dominates in both sovereign Sukuk and corporate Sukuk. And then comes Saudi Arabia is systemically important. So these are the 10 countries: Malaysia, Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iran, Bangladesh, Turkey, Bahrain, Qatar, UAE, Brunei, and Gambia. And corporation sector, Malaysia still number 1. Malaysia, Turkey, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Indonesia, Kuwait, Iran, Netherlands, Oman, and the United Kingdom. If you look at already explained in terms of domicile, in Saudi Arabia is the largest, Indonesia and Malaysia, these are the 3 countries dominate the Sukuk market. If you look at the type of Sukuk issuance, is still the financials are dominating 37%, government is dominating 56.3%. So that gives an idea what, so Sukuk is not a monolithic part, it has been issued into different sectors by the government, by the corporate sectors, and so on. And recently there is a trend we call green Sukuk or environmental sustainability Sukuk, and it is growing each year. 2000, if you look at this graph, 2017, 18, and 19, and it just a little bit background of this green Sukuk. ISDB, Islamic Development Bank, has issued a Sukuk in 2019 worth euro $1 billion. 2019 UAE also issued first corporate green Sukuk worth about $600 million. And Malaysia and Indonesia is dominating in this sector. The 2017, 18, and 19. 2019, Malaysia PNB Merdaka Venture issued its second tranche of green Sukuk worth about $880 billion and followed by other Sukuk structure. And Indonesian government started this thing in 2018 and 2019. They have issued the second Sukuk tranche worth about $750 million USD. So let me talk about some conceptual theoretical work that I have done and published in Journal of Business Ethics. So the singularities of Islamic finance require the conventional finance approach to be redesigned in order to satisfy the criteria of Islamic financing. These restrictions impose financing constraints to entrepreneurs seeking funds to undertake large-scale Islamic project finance investments. So while we develop a model, we try to link Islamic finance, project finance, and financial guarantee or credit issuance by a third party. Whether you like it or not, the financial guarantee has become a norm in international Sukuk issuance because of the credit rating agency. Now, the project finance is an arrangement in which a sponsor creates a new project company, which is called a special purpose vehicle, and looks to the project future cash flows as the main source of payment to lenders. It is an increasingly important method of financing large-scale capital investment projects such as power plants, oil pipelines, automated steel mills, roads, ports, tunnels, etc. It allows better risk sharing since lenders have to evaluate and audit only the project assets rather than having to assess the both project and sponsor assets as would be the case with other financing vehicles. Since project financial investment involve huge chunk of money and highly leveraged, one way for lenders to hedge credit risk is require financial guarantees for the loans they make. And a financial guarantee is a promise from a third party to make good on payments to the fund provider when the borrower defaults. Firms use financial guarantees to improve their credit rating and debt capacity in order to access to more funds and at lower cost. And it is very common in corporate world. So if you look at this picture, what financial guarantee does, on the left-hand side, you have an asset and you have the debt, some equity, but when you're giving a financial guarantee provided, it becomes on the left-hand side debt, but which is guaranteed by a third party, and still you have the asset. So the debt you will be collateralized by the asset in hand and guarantee provided by a third party. So there are different entity who works in this financial guarantee. In the US, you have Export-Import Bank, Islamic Development Bank also provide financial guarantee, World Bank provides financial guarantee, and so on. Now, we model the dynamics between equity holders, profit-sharing lenders, and the government in the arrangement of an Islamic project financing. The shareholders being the entrepreneur initiates a project and seeks outside funds to finance it. The entrepreneur finances part of the project investment with his own capital, and the remaining fund it borrowed from the third-party lender. In the finance agreement, lenders share profit after tax net income with the equity holders if the project is successful, but loses their investment in the case of default by the project. To reduce the default risk and enhance the creditworthiness of the project, the entrepreneur can seek loan guarantees from the government. And if the project turns out to be successful, the government gains tax revenues, and the debt holders and equity holders share the after-tax net income using a preset profit-sharing formula. Now, what we show through a modeling technique that there is a trade-off between the profit sharing and the percentage of the loan to be guaranteed. So if you as a project owner wants to share less profit with the lender, you have to get a third-party guarantee. The proportion has to be higher. For given level of debt financing, the entrepreneur has to decide ex ante whether to give up more profit share to lenders or seek government guarantee. So you can run this profit if you give more profit part of the project to the lender. If there is no flexibility of the investment amount, increasing the share of the profit to the lenders should result in decreasing equity holders' net wealth. But if you have flexibility over the amount of fund that you can invest, increasing either the share of the profit to lenders or the guarantee percentage of the loan will increase the debt capacity of the firm. So this increase in debt capacity consequently induces more investment, thus more taxable income available, which is beneficial for the government and the debt holders. So if this scheme works according to our model, everybody benefits from it. The project gets funded, the government gives guarantee but gets tax revenue. So, and the investors, those who are funding money to this project, benefit equally. So we develop a prototype mathematical model. We have three players in this model. The entrepreneur, we consider an entrepreneur sponsor who wants to undertake a new investment project. Several owners can coexist in this new venture. However, we use the term entrepreneur to designate the representative equity holder. The project will be built as a standalone special purpose vehicle, meaning that the project is an independent and separate entity, and the project requires an investment of I. The entrepreneur has limited ability and has only commitment in the project is his equity infusion of S. Now, so how much debt you need? So you need debt I minus S, but entrepreneur is facing financing constraint that the project can be undertaken only if the investment level I is superior to the minimum required investment. So in order to just take up this project, you have to have a minimum level of investment. But if you are constrained by fund as a sponsor or project owner, then you have to resort to the capital market or third party agency in international sense like World Bank. In this kind of Islamic financing, equity holders have to share the profit to debt holders if the project is successful. In distress situation, the priority goes to the debt holders. Debt will receive fraction of the firm's after-tax net profit, plus their principal amount if the project is successful. However, the owner keeps the residual value of the project. The government intervention. The government benefits from corporate taxes if the project is undertaken. Therefore, it is in the interest of the government to encourage the entrepreneur to go ahead with this project. But in Islamic context, since the conventional capital market channel cannot always be used, it can be hard for the entrepreneur to raise money in order to finance the project. And to overcome that, government will intervene by ensuring a fraction of the loan amount, and the maximum government guarantee coverage should be obtained when the marginal benefit is equal to the marginal cost of guaranteeing the loan. So this is a picture of our model. So if you look at the entrepreneur on the
Professor
left-hand
Kabir,
side.
can you make it larger so that it will be full screen? Otherwise, it's
okay. Is it better?
Thank you.
Okay.
Better, yeah.
So you have the entrepreneur and the lender. So entrepreneur provides seed capital, equity capital. The lender provides debt. If the decision to go ahead or not, if the answer is yes, you make the investment and the cash flow generated by the project. If the decision to go ahead, no, there is no cash flow. If the cash flow generated, you share this with the entrepreneur on a pre-agreed profit sharing ratio. On the lender side, the lender, the government provides guarantee, and if the guarantee lender provides, the entrepreneur gets the money, project gets executed, and the lender also will share the profit loss sharing with the entrepreneur. And the government, if the project becomes successful, it generates revenues, and the government gets taxes out of these revenues. It could be revenue generating or non-revenue generating. If it is a non-revenue generating, the economic productive capacity of the country increases, and there is a more taxable base, and from there tax revenue will be maximized. So in the next few slides, we do have some mathematical equation in order to show our model. So we just go through very quickly that capacity. So these are some equations, and you really need to put in time, and I ask you to read the original paper to get an idea of this thing. So once you develop this model, we run some calibration using MATLAB. We try to show what will be the net of structure to the non-insured lenders, what will be the net of to the insured lenders, what will be net well to the entrepreneur, and what will be net. So this is a calibration, if you can see in the picture, and the guarantee percentage with no investment flexibility, entrepreneur net worth with no investment flexibility, then maximum debt that this project can handle with investment flexibility, the maximum investment that can be made with investment flexibility, and entrepreneur net wealth with investment flexibility, and guarantee cost with investment flexibility, and the total tax revenue with investment flexibility. Now, government net wealth with investment flexibility. So we sort of run through all sort of possible combinations that you can find, taking the entrepreneur, the lender, and the government guarantee. So this is what, from this theoretical exercise, we come to this conclusion. We presented a model to study the interaction between the project sponsor, its lender, and the government. The entrepreneur has an investment opportunity is positive expected net gain. To finance the project, the entrepreneur contributes with own capital and seeks outside funds by issuing Islamic profit sharing debt instruments. He also requires government financial guarantees to enhance the creditworthiness and increase the debt capacity of the project. And the payoff to all participants are derived from their participation and incentive constraints within the equilibrium solution that we provide in our model. The participation constraints of debt holder determines the optimal profit sharing parameter and the maximum debt amount. The percentage of loan guarantee is also determined such that the government gains positive net wealth from the project. So it's a win-win situation for the government, it's a win-win situation for the entrepreneur, it's a win-win situation for the lender. However, the investment decision lies on the entrepreneur, and he gets the residual value of the project. Our work raises several policy implications related to the arrangement of Islamic project finance and the participation of both the government and multilateral public agencies such as the Islamic Development Bank, the World Bank, or IMF. We also provide a unifying framework for the improvement of access of funds in Islamic financing context, and gives a rationale for the government intervention in the arrangement of Islamic project finance. Having provided some theoretical background, let's look at some Sukuk structures. So before we do that, let me go through a difference between a conventional bond and Sukuk al-Ijara. Like in issuer, in Sukuk al-Ijara, we create an SPV, an entity which executes this contract. In conventional bond, the customer, obligor, Sukuk al-Ijara is customer, conventional bond customer. Asset, underlying tangible assets required. Conventional bond, it is not required. Principal and investment repaid full at maturity or could be amortized. And conventional, it paid at bullet at redemption. Yield is a flexible floating rate lease, and conventional is a fixed rate interest. Yield frequency, some annual, usually some annual, same thing. Prepayment, flexible, usually allowed after 2 years, and conventional bond is not allowed. Asset residual risk will terminate the total loss of the asset as we will appoint customer to fully insure the way the Sukuk structures are done right now, and the customer will maintain indemnify the SPV for any failure, and it is not relevant in conventional bond. Negative covenants, cross default, part pursue ranking, available in both cases. And status and liquidation can be structured either as unsecured creditor or secured creditor depending on the requirements. But in a conventional bond, is usually an unsecured creditor. So there is some vocabulary that came out in this Sukuk literature, like for development, for example, asset-based, asset-based, asset-light, presence of right to Sukuk asset in asset-backed is present, but the other two format, it is not. Risk and return deriving from the real asset performance, but on the other, it is not based on the guarantor's performance. If you look at the presence of the true sale transaction, an asset back is really present, but asset based or asset light is absent. Presence of guarantee is absent, and asset based present, and asset composition is highly denominated real asset, and the other two forms are combination between these two. Asset light is highly dominated by financial asset. Now there is a theoretical and conceptual and Sharia discussion right now. Which form of structure is more Sharia compliant or should be promoted? And I'm in the view that we have to promote the asset-based Sukuk because it fulfills all the conditions of the Sharia so that it becomes a Sharia compliant Sukuk issuance. I want to bring another thing from the Turkish Ottoman Empire history. They have an instrument called Isham, and it is also being issued or used as a structure. In this case, what happens? In both cases, Sukuk and physical asset, revenue stream is a fixed annuities, the Sukuk, and the Isham, the fixed annuities as a percentage of the profit generated by the underlying asset. Redemption at maturity, but Isham, there is no maturity. The wonderful thing about this thing, the borrower, the government can redeem the Isham certificates whenever it's convenient for them. Principal repayment as maturity, Isham, there is no principal repayment because it's like a perpetual bond. So the government can call back their bond whenever they want. Now, one of the good thing about the Isham and Sukuk, because there is no fixed maturity, and also there is no high legal cost, because in a Sukuk structure, you have a high transaction cost because of the SPB, and the Isham structure, you have a low transaction cost and the government debt management office can manage it. So let's look at some structures. So the first structure that I want to talk about is called Buy Bitmal Ajil bonds. So here corporate asset sells certain assets that it owns. Let's say Malaysian ringgit 500 million spot payment. So this is what the corporate, and the arranger will sell asset back to the corporate, let's say 550 million payable in 10 equal payments at the end of 5 years. And the corporate will defer payment by issuing BBA bond. So if you look at A, and then you have 2, and you have the 3, this BBA bond, and the BBA bond is issued to the investors, and it can be traded in the secondary market, and after this thing they get 550 million. But eventually what happens, this corporation gets the money 550 million, but it owes 550 million in the future to this to investors. If you look at another, so what I'm going to do the next few structure, and I'll tell you who has used this structure, so we'll have an idea. This is a sort of case study. So here in this case, number 1, if you look the arrows, the corporate sells assets to the SPC. So SPC will buy assets from corporate, say USD 500 million. and SPC will lease assets back to the corporation for 5 years. And so one, the corporation, the special purpose vehicle, then SPC issues Sukuk to the investors, and the purchase price the SPC gets and SPC provides to the corporation. Now SPC leases assets to the corporation, say for 5 years, corporate as a lessee, and the corporate makes a lease payment, and the special purpose vehicle then it provides the lease payment to the investors in terms of monthly return. So this is a narrative here that I have talked about. To raise 500 million USD, SPC will issue Sukuk at par value. Investors subscribe to the Sukuk as primary subscriber. SPC will collect the lease rentals and distribute pro rata to the Sukuk holders. And the Sukuk can be listed, rated, cleared through the Euroclear, traded in the secondary market. And the Kingdom of Bahrain Sukuk issues, the Federation of Malaysia, the State of Qatar, and the Republic of Pakistan Sukuk issues were structured based upon this concept. Then you have Ijara bonds, head lease and sublease. So SPC here will issue certain assets for the corporate for 10 years at an upfront lease rental considered as a $500 million. Then it will lease the asset back to the corporation as a sublease for 5 years. And the corporation will pay 6 monthly lease rentals in the areas benchmark with the USD LIBOR. And to raise 500 million, SPC will issue Ijara bonds to the investors, and they get this 500 million. Investors subscribe to Ijara bonds as a primary the bond holders. And SPC will collect the lease rentals and distribute pro rata to the Ijara bond holders. And the Ijara bonds can be listed, rated, cleared to the Euroclear and traded in the secondary market. Now the recent Kingdom of Bahrain Islamic bond issued and the Euro Islamic bond issued by the state of Saxony-Anhalt were structured based on this concept. In Indonesia, the Islamic bonds for PT Matahari and PT Apexindo were structured also using this manner. Now, you can have a Sukuk al-Musharaka structure. Here, the Musharaka land or physical asset contribution, they have a periodic profit, 20% incentive fee to the Musharaka company, and the issue proceeds, and the profit 80%, 20% goes to the Musharaka, 20% goes to the investors. So if you look at this structure, the corporate and the special purpose vehicle enters into a Musharaka arrangement for a period of let's say 5 years. Profit sharing ratio is between the SPC and the corporate 80-20. The corporate contributes land and other physical assets to the Musharaka. SPC as a Musharik contributes the lease process to the Musharaka, and the Musharaka appoints the corporation as an agent to develop the land with the cash injected in the Musharaka and sell, lease, develop asset on behalf of the Musharaka. In return, the agent, the customer will get a fixed agency fee plus variable incentive fee payable semi-annually 80% plus some sort of incentive fee. And the corporate irrevocably undertakes to buy at a pre-agreed price the Musharaka shares at SPC, say on a semi-annual basis at the end of 5 years. So there are some Sharia issues, but this is a structure that has been issued by the Dubai Metals and Commodity Exchange Rate for USD 300 million. Then you can have also an alternative Sukuk structure, and Emirates Airlines was structured based on this concept. So in this case, what happens? So instead of using your asset, you are selling the transfer of user fract. The corporate and special purpose vehicle enters into the Musharaka agreement for a period of let's say 5 years. Profit sharing ratio between SPC and the corporation 99-1. Because Emirates, instead of selling their plane, they are saying that the revenue they generate from their flight, they are going to share this revenue. That revenue will be used as a collateral against the Sukuk they are issuing. So corporate transfer use fract rights over land and other physical asset to the Musharaka, and SPC contributes cash. The issue proceeds to the Musharaka, and Musharaka appoints corporate as an agent to develop the land, and so on. The net profit of the Musharaka is divided between the SPC. So you can see all these things narrow going down, use FRAC to the Mosharaka. There's a 99%, 1% profit sharing ratio. You create a special purpose vehicle. The issue process goes to the Mosharaka. And then this number 3 is leases the assets after 5 years. Number 4, if you look at issues Mosharaka plus periodic profit to the investors. And 5, undertakes to buy the Musharaka shares at the pre-arranged price. Now, you have also Morabaha with investment certificate. So this is very like, you know, a special purpose company buys a spot basis USD 250 million worth LME metal from broker A. So this is it's like a kind of Tawaruk type of commodity Moraba type of transactions where you use a metal or a third party because in order to make sure that there's a buying and selling happens. So that's another structure you can do, Morabha with investment certificate. And there is a Sharia concern of this thing too. And there's a leading investment bank, First Islamic Investment Bank, Bahrain, has issued this structure in 2003 and 4. Now, Islamic project financing, when it comes, usually the most prevalent structure is Istisna plus Ijara. So Istisna, you have a procurement contract. The most common Islamic financing structure for construction project is a combination of Istisna followed by Ijara, is a lease contract. Since the project assets would have to be constructed by a contractor or a supplier, the Islamic investor would fund the construction of certain project assets through the Istisna arrangement directly with the client or project company. Then at the same time, you execute a forward Ijara lease. Simultaneously with this Istisna, the Islamic investor would enter into an Ijara. I'm using a generic term is Islamic, so please don't misunderstand. Anybody can do that. You don't have to be a Muslim in order to get into this contract. A forward lease, since the said project assets have not been delivered yet, with the client or the project company for a certain period of time, equal to the tenure of the Islamic facility. The funding of the Islamic facility would be channeled to the Istisna arrangement, and the repayment of the Islamic facility would follow under the Ijara agreement. At maturity of the Ijara period, the said project would come back to the client of the project company and all financial arrangement would be terminated. So this is a very similar concept that you see conventional project finance, BOT, build, operate, and transfer. So this is a sort of picture here. So if you look at number 1, investment agent appoints client as a contractor under the Istisna contract. So investment agent here, the client, and the client delivers the project assets as per the schedule. And number 3, investment agent disburses the facility as per the project payment schedule. So investment agent will also, the client will pay them the regular money so that they can build this project. Number 4, investment agent leases the project assets to the client, and the client as a lessee pays semi-annual lease payment, and investor provide the project financing. It could be Islamic investors and conventional, because many cases of the Sukuk or big infrastructure project that I have studied, they have both Islamic financing facility and conventional financing facility. Now, this is a Dolphin. It's a real case study. So Dolphin is a GIB facility agent and investors. Dolphin Energy Limited and the sponsor Mabdala Development Company, Original Petroleum Corporation, Oxy. It is a gas pipeline, the lease asset between Abu Dhabi and Qatar, worth about $1 billion. And the structure they have used is called Istisna Ijara, and pricing was London Interbank offer price 35 basis points for the first 2 years, and last 2 years 45 basis points. It has a 4-year tenure and multilateral lending agencies. There's several banks are involved, so it's a syndicated loan. And the security package or oil pipelines was their collateral, and completion guarantee provided by dispensers. So here is an example that you have an asset as a collateral plus a guarantee by third party. And there one Islamic bank was involved and 14 conventional banks. It has very same structure that I have shown you before. It's a Ijara financing, forward lease, and Istisna contract. Now coming back, the financing revenue generating infrastructure project using the structure that I have shown you is a sort of variant of the structure. Financing issues force governments not to take advantage of the benefits afforded by these projects. Here is a funding structure using Mudaraba-based Sukuk that would overcome the disadvantage of traditional debt financing. So here is a 10-year project based on Istisna Mudaraba-based Sukuk. So here what happens, this is the construction phase, stage 1. So host government is pledge assets land. It establishes an SPV for project A underlying asset, land plus concession agreement. Then Sukuk is issued, Sukuk Mudaraba drawdown to the investors, and investors provide money back to the SPC. And there is a trustee to oversee all this process. And the SPC gives money, project financing to the contractor, because this is a contract. During this time period, they have to pay money to the contractor on the basis of different performance indicator. So during this time, this project is being built. So second phase from 5 to 10, project is built. Now what happens? The SPB now pays dividend to the investors because the project will start generating revenues, and the revenues shared to the investors in a profit sharing ratio. And there will be a reserve account in order to do accounting. Trustee will make sure it oversees the entire process. The revenue, the contract and concession will pay the revenue back to the SPC, SPB or SPC, and they will share this government share of this profit back to the host government. Now, third one, once the project is built, the second, you have a few years, the investment return is being shared between the investor, the Sukuk holder, and the government. And finally, you go to the capital market through an IPO. So you go to your local national stock exchange, you issue an IPO, and let's say the IPO is what market value is $1,000 million. But initially, what happened that the Sukuk holder probably provided 600, and the government provided 150. So total investment was 750. So when through this IPO process, the investor account 600 becomes 800, and the government 150 becomes 200. So you can also look at what is the way this money will be distributed between the investors and the host government. The bottom line is, through this public offering, that you are integrating your government infrastructure project financing with the wider citizens of your country. And in this process, both the government benefits, they get a $50 million of benefit out of these things. It could be in terms of tax revenue, and the investors gets a higher premium because they have invested profitably in this investment project. Now, what are some of the good things about this structure? Unlike the use of debt financing, there is no financial obligation for the government. All the government is providing a land and so on. And maybe, and the first part of my presentation said they can provide guarantee. They may or may not, or this project sponsor can get guarantee from a third party for World Bank and so on. With the listing of such a large and stable cash flow project on the domestic stock exchange, local equity markets grow and develop. By keeping the face value of the Sukuk Mudaraba small, the project becomes inclusive, with even small investors participating in the largest project and then providing financial inclusion. Now, so here we just gave an example for a project that generates revenue and revenues shared between the government and the investors. But how about a project that doesn't generate a revenue? It's a general purpose bond. So risk sharing is less direct for funding a non-revenue generating development project. The funding will have to be based on some other benchmark on index, which in turn is in some way linked to the earning capacity of the government. So there was a World Bank study, the Edward Borzenstein and Paulo Moore 2002, they argue that the GDP-linked bonds are likely to improve debt sustainability for government, especially during downturns. So we are using the structure, and actually this is coming from a paper written by Ubaidullah. So he used this basic model, Eduardo Borgestin, Paulo Moro outlined the 5 different methods to use to determine the returns to a GDP-linked bond. So if you read the entire paper, it gives you some sort of idea if the growth rate is greater than BR or growth rate is less than BR. So R is the percent of return in year, G is the percent of growth of real GDP in a given year, and BR is the base rate, average growth rate of the last 5 years. So the way you determine how much you're going to provide to the Sukuk holder, it depends on how well the economy is doing. So you use a benchmark using like say 5 to 10 year GDP growth rate of a country, and you during economic good times you pay better than the base rate, and during the economic downturn you pay the base rate or less than that. So depending on whether the country is rapidly growing or not, the coefficient can vary. The debt servicing obligation of the government is lowered as GDP growth slows. So this has an inbuilt stabilizer that reduces the stress and reduces the vulnerability. So one of the structure that can use in order to do this non-revenue generating projects called Sukuk or Istimar. So here in this case, and providing based on the Borgestin Mori equations. So you have an SPV, the government as obligor, provide undertaking. Number 2, it issues Sukuk to the investors. Number 3, it gets processed back. Number 4, the Sukuk process goes back to the government. And number 5, the government makes annual payment. And number 6, the SPV makes annual payment to the investors. And of course, in this structure, there's a trustee over there. Now, let me come to the final part of my presentation. So we talked about a theory, then we gave you some practical structure from the case studies that has been used in different jurisdictions. Now, we want to talk about what is a governing law, how a Sukuk structure should be structured in order to benefit everyone. So, importance of legal documentation in Islamic finance is very important. There is a binding imperativeness of legal documentation of transaction in the Quran and Sunnah, and there's the longest verses of the Quran, Ayat al-Dain. If you read this longest, it talks about contracts. So contract is very important. Contract has to be very ambiguous. If it is not, that creates a lot of confusion, lot of distrust, and so on. Regardless of the in-depth examination Islamic finance contracts carried out by the Sharia scholar, prior to certification, the legal draftsperson play a crucial role that may make or mar a contract. So this part of the presentation is coming from a paper that I have written, Umar Hussaini, and actually he is the chief executive of International Liability Management Center based in Kuala Lumpur, and he is responsible of issuing a lot of Sukuk, and it goes through his hand. The governor law clauses and law applicable to Sukuk issuer. Most of the existing Sukuk transactions in the global Islamic market today are pure replicas of conventional prospectus with an attempt to make them Sharia compliant. Apart from other market players, the Sukuk issuer plays a major role in the whole transaction. But the question is, what law is applicable to this issuer? Though the governing law of Sukuk prospectus governs the contractual terms of the Sukuk as well as interpretation, the Sukuk issuer as a separate legal entity has its own unique corporate law. In the modern practice, it is very common to sue the SPV as the issuer. The laws of the jurisdiction where such SPV was incorporated are also applicable to its corporate transactions. So here we're talking about conflicting jurisdiction, and that creates confusion, and the number of Sukuk defaulted because of this confusion. Now, the above complexity depends on jurisdiction where the issuer was incorporated. And the regulators of ICM have been trying to put in place sound regulatory system across GCC and South Asia. Despite this effort, there have been instances of Sukuk defaults. A number of Sukuk default at the global level still at a single digit. Malaysia has recorded, because Malaysia has about 70% of the Sukuk, both conventional, both corporate Sukuk and government Sukuk. So there is a casual link between the defaults and legal documentation, particularly the way the Sukuk is structured. So let's look at 5 different jurisdictions, how that is being done. So the Cayman Island, You have a main legislation of their country, you have the scope, you have the dispute resolution, and you have the regulatory body. So I want you to pay attention to the dispute resolution, because the conflict, when there is a conflict or default or bankruptcy, how you solve or resolve this issue, where you take this issue to. So Cayman Island, the dispute resolution is done in English court. If you look at Malaysia, Malaysia has their own legislation, the scope of the legislation, the regulatory body, Security Commission Malaysia, but they resolve to the Security Industry Dispute Resolution Center or the civil court within Malaysia. So this is one of the reasons why Sukuk is growing so rapidly in Malaysia, because they have a clause that helps them to develop this market if there is a conflict. So they do not have to fight with whether it's a Malaysian law, whether it's a Sharia law, or whether it's an English court law. Saudi Arabia, same thing. The Capital Market Authority is a regulatory body, and they have their committee of resolution of security disputes, and the appeal panel, and so the courts. Again, that's another reason, if you see, the Sukuk market is developing, because they have a less conflict if there is a bankruptcy. United Arab Emirates, also the same thing. So that's also another reason why the Sukuk is growing in this jurisdiction. But United Kingdom, the Financial Services Authority regulatory body, the English court, is the ultimate dispute resolution mechanism. So what we can conclude, the English law and the exclusive jurisdiction of English courts. So if you look at some of the structures that I have talked about in second part of my presentation, general trend of choosing English law as the governing law in Sukuk prospectus and the exclusive jurisdiction of English courts to hear and determine any dispute, claim, or action arising from such transactions. So this is the preference of market players in Sukuk transaction. Part of the reason is that most of the leading law firms drafting Sukuk prospectus are English and Western firms with offices across Southeast Asia and GCC countries. For the sake of certainty in huge investments such as Sukuk, there is a need for a more formal forum for dispute resolution. So that's why they prefer English court or English law for dispute resolution. An example, GE Capital Sukuk and Goldman Sachs Sukuk. You see, these are the Western companies. So they do not want to go resort to the Sharia law or to the dispute resolution mechanism in Malaysia or Saudi Arabia or UAE. They want to have their investment protected. So they prefer an English law, because these companies are based in the United States. So it's an English law country as well. English law and non-exclusive jurisdiction of the English courts, provision for a mixed legal and regulatory regime owing to the fact that stakeholders in transaction are in different jurisdictions. This category partly provides for English law as the governing law, while emphasizing non-exclusivity of the jurisdiction of the English law in determining any claim or action under the prospectus. So if there is a bankruptcy, there's a default, English law is not the guiding principle. And this has led to problems of uncertainty of some jurisdictions, which amounts to legal risk in the transaction. And some example, QIB Sukuk, Nakhil Sukuk, and Malaysian Sukuk. So you see, these countries, their Sukuk, yes, they take governing laws, the English law, but the dispute resolution, they retain their right. And that's where the conflict arises. Then you have the Sharia as the exclusive governing law. This is what I prefer. Jurisdiction that insists on the stipulation of Sharia compliant dispute resolution process, and the governing law shall be the Sharia. And so this is a new approach to the drafting of Sukuk prospectus. So the electricity company Sukuk prospectus that provides for mandatory application of Sharia as well as laws of KSA. Forum for settlement of dispute resolution is the ultimate arbiter in terms of default or bankruptcy. So the provision for arbitration Sukuk transaction is very important. Paradigm shift to amicable alternative dispute resolution process in civil and commercial transaction has largely influenced the dispute resolution agreement in governing clauses of Sukuk prospectus. So this is a movement in the law arena. They are trying to, instead of avoiding they want to avoid the law because it's a lengthy process. So they have this arbitration process so that they can resolve their difference or dispute very quickly. The South Sukuk prospector partly provides for the likelihood of arbitration in the settlement of disputes between the company and other party. In a more emphatic term, the Dana Sukuk, I'll give you a case study, limited prospector provides that any disputes which may arise out of or in connection with the transaction documents may be finally settled under the rules of the London Court of International Arbitration. Arbitration serves as a preventive and remedial measure for protecting the Sukuk holders. So here is a timeline of this Dana gas Sukuk, what is happening. If you just want to go through very quickly, 2007, Dana gas issued $1 billion Sukuk, and Dana just to build a oil field in Egypt. October 2012, the Dana gas defaults on Sukuk reaches standstill with creditors. December 2012, Dana gas proposes new Sukuk plan. 13, shareholders of Dana approves this restructuring plan. 2013 May, Dana gas completes restructuring. And April 2017, Dana gas renegotiate with the stockholders on the US 700 million facility to mature in October 2017. So this process continues, goes back and forth to the court, like in November 2017 UK, because the governing law is the UK court or dispute resolution mechanism declares purchase undertaking enforceable. Dana gas to appeal the court decision. London court proceeds to the Dana gas trial, and the stockholder proposes a plan. Dana gas says no. August 2017, Dana gas withdraws swap offer. July 2007, Deutsche demands Sukuk's payment. Dana gas rejects request. June 2017, Dana gas declares Sukuk unlawful, and it goes to the UA court in 2017 because that's what the dispute resolution is. Dana gas to purchase the UK High Court proceedings. UK court rejects again Dana gas. Dana gas fails in talks. And 2018, UK High Court rules in favor of Dana gas creditors. 2018, Sharia court suspend enforcement on UK court orders and issues anti-suit injunction against BlackRock. And 2018 April, UK court reject Dana gas from paying dividend. And 2018 May, Dana gas reaches agreement with the creditors. So this shows you the conflict between the Sharia law and the governing law. So whenever any country jurisdiction wants to come up with a Sukuk, what is a sovereign Sukuk and corporate Sukuk, you must keep this in mind. As I say, it's a 700 million Sukuk. It has a two different 350 million ordinary Sukuk and 350 million, 7%, 9% with the 3.5-year maturity. The Sharia issues of this structure, reason for default, Sharia non-compliance. Critics say that this was never a Sharia issue, but a credit issue. The use of Sharia compliancy may have been a convenient and albeit debatable excuse to perhaps prompt commercial discussion. It was obvious that the company merely had a cash flow problem in meeting its debt obligation, which needed the time and patience by the creditors to resolve, said Christopher Hearn, the CEO of the Dana Gas. So the legal implication of this case study is the complexity of having two parallel court cases in two jurisdictions, at times ruling in contradiction of each other. In the Sukuk documentation ecosystem, the governing law clauses are determined based on Islamic and capital markets documents. Under the Islamic documents, the concept of lax status is applied to ascertain the appropriate governing law. In the Mudaraba structure based on lax status, the governing law Mudaraba agreement need not have been governed by UAE law. And UAE Civil Code said the company stipulates that under a Mudaraba transaction, it is the providers of the capital alone who bear the losses, and any provision to the contrary is void. If the loss exceeds the profits, the balance therefore in theory owned by the investors. So Dana Gas highlights the importance of standardization. A standardized Sharia interpretation and standardized legal documentation, which will be the governing law, would reduce the risk of someone being able to remove uncertain claim that something is not Sharia compliant. Finally, in June 2017, proposal to restructure the existing Sukuk with a proposal to exchange the current Sukuk with a new 4-year enforceable Sharia compliant instrument, and the terms of the Mudaraba Sukuk were modified to reflect changes agreed to by the Sukuk holders. So I'm coming to the end. So what needs to be done? There has to be a holistic approach to Islamic finance transactions. You have a practitioners, legal and financial, and you have the Sharia scholars on the other hand. The practitioner needs to work closely with the Sharia scholars. They need to strive to learn more about Islamic finance. Their knowledge is limited and they have to increase their vocabulary. They have to avoid copy and paste approach, particularly in drafting Sukuk. They simply cannot just change the terms in the conventional Sukuk, conventional bond instrument and just put it in the concept of Islamic Sukuk, because Islamic Sukuk, from the structure wise, from the concept wise, is very much different than a conventional bond. So the Sharia scholar has to be also very cognizant. They have to make sure they should not run any fatwa without understanding the structure. They must maintain the original value proposition of Islamic finance. They have to be more proactive in their functions. Their duty includes overseeing the implementation of their rulings. They can follow AOFI 2008, and that will lead to ultimately a more pragmatic approach in developing commercially viable and competitive Sukuk structure without compromising the requirement for the Sharia compliance. And given this background, it is also very important to conclude with some findings and recommendations. So this is the recommendations. Scholars should extrapolate the relevant Islamic legal principles on post-default issues such as bankruptcy, litigation, and dispute resolution. I would urge our Sharia scholar brothers and sisters who are in the audience to study Fiqh Muamalat more in depth, more intensively, to bring out this new concept that was not present during the history of the Islamic finance for the last 1400 years. So we need to do more istihad. Copy and paste approach should be avoided in drafting of the Sukuk. A gradual drift from party autonomy to mandatory provision of the Sharia. So Sharia has to be ultimate guiding principle. The field of law plays an important role in the development of Islamic capital market. Both Sharia scholar and Sharia scholar, actually they are the legal scholar. They have to really study each other, the conventional scholars. So they have to have a meeting of mind, and through education to increase their knowledge of Islamic finance. And as a result, and it is supporting mechanism has to be robust and sound regulatory framework for the global Sukuk market. So that is all, my dear friends. And these are some of the references. You can Google it and you can find them. And if you want some of it, I can send it to you if you send me your contact details. So that's all I want to say, Medina and Shamil. So
thank you so
much.
Thank you so much, Professor Kabir. You really, in such a short time, in 1 hour, covered a lot of important aspects related to Sukuk and the very, very relevant issues. And I believe that a person should have studied many hours and even years to get all that information and all the cases and all the important notes and findings that you shared today. Indeed, many people are asking about the slides and about the video. At the end of this seminar, I will send a feedback form, and subject to filling out that form and the email stated there, we will send out and disseminate the slides and the video. Now it's time for the audience to give their questions. There have been really some discussion in the chat commenting on the information you said. I would ask the audience to raise their hands in case you have the questions, and first of all to present yourself and then ask your question. And first of all, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Shamil Orlov. Dear Mr. Shamil, do you have to comment something or to ask any question?
Yeah, thank you, Medina. Professor, thank you from the bottom of my heart for this brilliant presentation. It was synthetic, it gives an overview, but it gives also depth. And at the end of your presentation, we have, at least I have enormous food for thoughts and food for further studies, I'm sorry. I have a question. I would like to ask a question which is coming both from my little practice on capital markets, but also from your presentation. You have made in part of your presentation a special accent on the government guarantees. Now, in other parts and throughout the presentation, the feeling is that the Sukuk market is either something for and by governments, or at least with government guarantees, or for very, very large companies which are maybe not governmental, but still having heavy, heavy balance sheets. Can you please make some comments about the theory, but also the practice about capital marketing, Islamic finances for small ventures, startups, people who do not have the capacity to get state guarantees and definitely no capacity to get balance sheets, large balance sheets aligned to their proposal. We know that the EBRD had a lot of such funds. What about the Islamic finance markets?
Okay, let me tell you, actually, in probably in another context, any of the Sukuk structure that you see, I mean, worldwide, in Malaysia, there is, because the credit rating agencies want the, in order for the Sukuk to be rated, they want some sort of guarantee, okay, whether like it or not, whether it is by the government or by the third party and so on. I just want to make myself clear. My theoretical model in the Journal of Business Ethics paper, it talks about how the government can facilitate that infrastructure financing, because they are doing it anyway. Because when the government takes on a project, and of course it is taxing the citizens, get the money, and then they make this project. But point the citizens into the infrastructure project financing, but the citizens want some sort of guarantee. But in Islamic finance, if something between you and me, let's say doing a transaction, we cannot guarantee each other. But if Medina as a third party guarantees this and ask for a benefit from it, that is allowed. But that guarantee, because of practical necessity, the way Sukuk structures are done anywhere, any Sukuk structure you pick up, there has to be a guarantee provided by third party. But here, let's say in the context of Russia, if the guarantee is not a very popular word over there, now you can have somebody else providing the guarantee, and the guarantee will not be for free. I do not know whether Russia is a member of World Bank or IMF. I should know this. You are not part of member of World Bank or IMF? Unmute yourself.
Please unmute yourself.
Oh, sorry for that.
Yeah.
We are members of World Bank, definitely.
Okay, so
we have some political issues these days.
Yeah, I know. Aside from this thing, so you can have a guarantee from a third party. Like a few days ago, there was a big, debate and political problem with Podda Bridge, one of the largest bridge, $3 billion, and the World Bank financing. So anything that you do, the concept of guarantee has to be there. Now, in the context, if I bring it back to in context of Russia, the main purpose I can understand, you see, there is also intention. You want, like in food chain, investment into the food supply chain or infrastructure, you name it, you want the Middle Eastern money. And the Middle Eastern people or citizens or the investors will not going to come to Russia, or they will come more if it is a Sharia compliant. So you're trying to make this a Sharia compliant, right? So these people also are very sophisticated as well. They want, and that is something wrong. That's where the education comes in. They want fixed the guarantee. Their money will be protected. They are willing to take risk. Okay, I may not earn 5%, 4%, but some way they do not want to lose the entire investment, go away. In the context of Russia, it could be for political reason. If Russian government says that no, we are not going to pay anything, we are defaulting, what can you do? So what is the alternative dispute settlement mechanism? But having said this, the very essence, I would say the Islamic investors are not also following the Sharia. You know, if it's a Modaraba structure, they should stand ready to take the loss. That's the whole concept of Modaraba structure. If it is a Mosharaka structure, they will share the loss in proportion to the investment of their capital, right? So if they're 20% contribute, they will take the 20% loss, not 100% loss. So unfortunately, that's where the education comes in. Yes, we want the Islamic title in front of it. It doesn't make it Islamic. So you really have to go deeper into this thing. So the Islamic investors, they have to be also Islamic as well. They have to follow. But the human nature is that, you know, we want some sort of certainty. Now, if you want to, for example, you want to develop your mutual fund, for example, or let's say you want to attract the Russian investors into this infrastructure project, and they want to give money to the government. So they also want some sort of guarantee that they will get a rate of return. But if the guarantee is provided by the government, I'm talking for government project, it will be illegal according to Islamic Sharia. But it is provided by third party. Now the reality, what is happening, they create all this complex legal structure to make it look like Sharia compliant. So you know what it means, the structure makes it more inefficient and more expensive. And this drafting company or the scholar, I mean, the lawyers are very highly priced. Let me give an anecdotal evidence. I have a very good friend of mine. I will not name him. So he studied medicine first. Okay. So he practiced medicine for a few years. He doesn't like it. Then he went back to the law school. He became a lawyer. He practiced corporate law. He doesn't like it. And finally, he became an Islamic finance lawyer. And any deal that comes to the United States, the private equity market is very big, which you do not hear. And a lot of Middle Eastern money is coming to the United States, and 80% of the deal is done by him. He has become super rich by doing Islamic finance, but he also believes in it. But what he's saying, so from doctor, lawyer to Islamic finance, because he has the skill set, he has found a way to earn money, and he also has a belief in it. But he tells me, Doc, because of this jurisdictional conflict, Sharia law, US law, international law, the agreements or the drafting becomes very complex. And because they're very complex, just in order to comply with the letters of the law of the Sharia. So these are so that you can, it's a Sharia compliant. But essence, it is very much similar to a conventional bond. So this is mimicking that is going on. I really do not have the answer right now how to get out of this thing. But even if you want to do in Russia, you have to follow whatever the existing paradigm is. But my, you know, through training, research, I want to bring the value proposition. The value proposition means helping each other, you know, partnership type of financing. We share the pain, we share the gain. Those type of thought process that will make this whole universe, the whole humanity as a paradise, as one brother, the brotherhood, you know, one human community, rather than you Russian, I'm a Bengali, he is Somali, you know, you know, those kind of conflict and killing each other. You really need to get out of this thing. And maybe this partnership type of financing is a solution to all the global financial woes that we are seeing happening very frequently. We do not need greed and competition. That's the essence of capitalism, market economy. Greed and compete. We want cooperation and compassion. And cooperation and compassion, it can be achieved through the risk-sharing financing principle. We want shared prosperity, not one brother is poor, the other brother is rich. So I'm sorry, I made a very long answer to your question.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Kabir. Dear colleagues, okay, do you have any, if you have any questions, please raise your hands. Okay, I see that there is a question. Please don't forget to introduce yourself. Now we can switch on your mic. Yeah, you can speak.
Yes.
Please. Yes.
Yes, you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Doctor, for your presentation. I want just to understand from the doctor, because
Please introduce yourself first.
Yes, I am Ghazal Mohammed. I am a PhD candidate in IIBF, IIUM, Malaysia. I am Algerian. Okay. I want to understand from the doctor the possibility to use the implementation of Sukuk in different jurisdictions, and especially not in common law like Malaysian or Southeast Malaysia or Gulf, but in other countries like Mediterranean, African Mediterranean countries, like they follow civil law. In this case, how we can implement Sukuk, even for Russia, how we can implement Sukuk based on the current legislation and regulation, because the rules already here, they are for conventional securities like bonds or shares. But when we want to introduce Sukuk for the first time, we use the current or the existing legislation, which is not favorable to introduce Sukuk. In this case, what we should do, for example, letting issuance of Sukuk based on the current legislation, and after that enact Sukuk, or we should first amend the current legislation and to allow first for preparation the rules and the regulation to adapt Sukuk, and after that issuing Sukuk in capital market. And thank you.
You know, I totally agree with you. That's what I have been advocating. You know, many jurisdictions, because they are using Sukuk, because what is happening, if you look at about 70% of the Islamic finance industry is banking. And what a bank does is Murabha banking. And most of the Islamic banks have surplus liquidity because they do not find enough investment project where you can invest the money in a Sharia compliant way. So in many jurisdictions, the government has a huge budget deficit. So they borrow from the banking system with the interest rate, but they cannot do it from an Islamic bank. So I think many cases the government wants to suck up this excess liquidity from the Islamic bank. So they are coming up with this Sukuk instrument. So their intention, I very much question really. I mean, the Sukuk should be a capital market instrument in order to develop the economy, in order to increase the capacity. So before you get into this kind of thing, rather than, you know, trying to taking their money out in Islamic way, you need to have a capital market law. You have to have a Sukuk law. Everything has to be structured in a Sharia compliant way, so that whatever instrument is coming up to the market is following the Sharia. You know, but forget about the word Sharia, because sometimes it brings a negative connotation. I'm talking about risk sharing finance, because risk sharing finance is beneficial to everyone. Nobody can question it. It has nothing to do with faith. Now, you know, to bring the risk sharing finance and using an instrument Sukuk, you need to have your law and regulations structured before you issue this. Otherwise, anything that you do, it will be like a mimicking. It's a financial engineering, you know, in order to make your, in order to achieve your goal, but not necessarily achieving the essence of Islamic finance, which is risk sharing finance, helping each other, developing, reducing hunger, infrastructure development, education, you name it. You know, SDG has 17 goals. In any of the 17 goals, you can apply Islamic finance concept. And it's religion neutral, it's faith neutral, anybody can accept it.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. We have here Mr. Alexander Kazakov from the Russian Association of Experts in Islamic Finance. Alexander, would you like to comment or ask any question?
Yeah, thank you, Madina. And first of all, thank you, Mr. Hassan, for this brilliant conversation. I'm sorry, I had a internet issue last 10 minutes, but I was with you during the whole presentation. Actually, I have one practical issue. While reading on Sukuk and listening to some presentation, I got to know that basically there are much more asset-linked sukuk compared to truly asset-based sukuk. And as far as I know, there are like all asset-based sukuk could be counted by like fingers of two hands. With this regard, for the current couple of years, do we have any successful evidence of bankruptcy of the sukuk issuer, where asset-based structure was involved, and where upon the bankruptcy, the note holders were fully compensated?
Okay, first of all, thank you. Apparently you are knowledgeable, seems to be from your question that you are trying to use the word asset-based versus asset-backed. So there was in 2007 and 8, you know, Justice Taqi Usmani, one of the leading scholar in Islamic finance nowadays, and issued a fatwa. He looked at all the sukuk structure that exist in the market. He said that 85% of the sukuk are not Sharia compliant. They are not following Islamic law because these are asset based. They're using an asset as a camouflage, but a sukuk holder does not have a recourse to the asset in terms of bankruptcy. So very question that you're asking, if you're a sukuk holder, you will be stand ready to accept a loss. But if you do not accept a loss, it is not a truly an asset-backed sukuk. And second thing, in most of the government or sovereign sukuk, what they use their government properties. Let's say, give an example, that the Russian government decides to issue a government sukuk using Kremlin as an asset. Now, theoretically, the sukuk holder are the owner because it's through sale, right? Kremlin has been sold to the sukuk holder as they are the real owner of this Kremlin. Do you think that if Russian government defaults, they are going to tell, okay, now you can take the Kremlin, you can sell to the open market and take whatever process you get? It is not possible. So what is happening, most of the sukuk structure is asset-based and it is creating more debt. It is monetizing the existing asset. Same, I have given one example in my presentation, this in Germany, for example. Germany has used the state-owned buildings as a collateral to issue sukuk. Basically, they are monetizing their existing asset. So those type of structure is creating more debt. It is not really increasing the economic capacity or the growth and development of the country. So the sukuk that I'm talking about is for futuristic. You use sukuk in order to build a highway. You use sukuk in order to build a university. You use sukuk in order to build a food processing plant or do trade financing in food, you know, selling food or distributing soon, having this ecosystem of this food all over the world so the people do not die out of hunger because of the supply chain problem. So this is, I just want to say to answer your question, now this tug of war, those right now, the Bangladesh government is trying to come up with a sukuk, and I want to see which structure they are undertaking. If the structure is an asset-based, and which I think it is, Ijara type, from technical standpoint, from the Sharia standpoint, it's okay. But what is the end result? Are you creating something new? You are supposed to create something new in order to using this instrument. This is what you call value-based finance. This is what you call responsible finance. This is what you call investment, impact investing, socially responsible investment, but that is not happening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Kabir. I would like to give the floor to Mr. Andrei. I believe this is Andrei Zhuravlyov, also the member of Russian Association of Experts in Islamic Finance and lecturer in Islamic Finance. Mr. Andrei, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Medina. Hello, everyone. Hello, Kabir. Thanks for your presentation. I would like to comment a little bit on the last issue that Alexander has risen. Firstly, it's really quite difficult to structure a sukuk which is a sovereign sukuk, having in mind a structure that is that's asset-based, because as Kabir has absolutely correctly pointed out, it's most of the time it's pretty difficult to have a government asset, a public asset, to be to have a public asset as something that can be at least even theoretically transferred, at least and even temporarily transferred to a non-public entity as a new owner, let alone a foreign person who may be an investor in such a sukuk. As for Alexander's question, I think it was whether there had been any cases of asset-backed sukuk structures that really protected investors. If I understood it correctly, I mean the question correctly, then the answer is yes. There were quite few, because they are generally not popular at all. But there were such instances, and one of those, perhaps the most famous one, is the Cameron gas case. Cameron Gas was an independent oil and gas producer in the United States, and they had to file for bankruptcy in 2008. I think the year is correct. But before that, they had issued a small, they made a small issuance of sukuk, something in the area of $150 million only, but yet. And the underlying asset was some blocks of Equatoria in the Bay of Louisiana. And that was done through the asset-backed structure. Therefore, when they filed for bankruptcy, they wanted to have those rights also part of their assets to go under bankruptcy. And the investors went to the court, and the court at the end of the day ruled in favor of the investors, and those blocks, or rather royalties, which were pledged against as a collateral, in fact, for the issuance for the paper, they stayed with the investors, and so they were really bankruptcy remote. And they did not go under the procedure, and were protected by way of using this asset-backed structure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Andre, for this comment. And we have a question also from in the chat. Let me read it out. A question from Issa Al-Mansouri, a PhD student of Islamic Finance Economy from Qatar Hamad bin Khalifa University from Qatar. The question is, what do you think of blockchain sukuk? Blossom Finance is already issuing some in smaller packages and for lower transaction costs.
Oh, it's a very interesting question. You know, this is a new technology. So first of all, whatever you do, whether you use AI, Internet of Things, blockchain, cryptocurrency, you know, those structure, that is, of course, human invention, but you have to keep the basic structure of the Sharia there. And if they are following the Sharia structure using a blockchain is a method, that's perfectly okay. But personally, I have not really studied that structure that you're referring to. But they, if you look at the slide that I'm just showing right now, as long as this is an asset-backed, this will be an ideal situation, or asset-based for the time being, because you're letting this industry to develop. But our ultimate goal should be asset-backed. But what is happening right now, now not only that is any of the structure asset-backed or asset-based, it has become asset-light. So I'm really very, very worried. If this is the way the development of the Sukuk industry goes, you can bring blockchain, you can bring artificial intelligence, but you have to make sure which structure you are using. If you're using asset light, if it is a blockchain, it doesn't really entice me, make me encouraged, because you are not doing something right. If it is asset based, it's little better. But if it is asset baked, it is the way it should be. Now, as comment by a previous scholar from Russia said, it is difficult, for sovereign bond to do this. Now, what can be done? That's why we need to have the education, understanding, do research, istihad, and so on. Unfortunately, what is happening, because Islamic finance industry is about 50 plus years old, so there are two groups of people, Sharia scholar who understand the Islamic legal jurisprudence, and we have these finance scholars who understand how the modern system works. You really need to bring this together, two minds together, have to have two in one, in order to develop this Islamic finance industry. Whether you use modern technology or in an old way, it's irrelevant unless those two minds are together, and that's where the education is very important. We need to create this new brand of scholars who are two in one, who understand Sharia, who understand banking and finance principle, and can do things in one mind rather than two minds fighting with each other. And I have given you some complexity of the jurisdiction of governing law of Sukuk and the Sharia and how they conflict with each other. And Danagas, as mentioned by the Russian scholar, is a good example. That's all I want to say, my friend. I wish I had a better answer, but I do not know specifically that structure that you're talking about. Maybe that will encourage me to go back and study that structure, inshallah.
Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you very much, Professor Kabir. We have almost reached, exhausted our time, and maybe I could read the last question from the chat from Uisa from Nigeria. What do you know? What do you say maybe on the issue of asset-based versus asset-backed Sukuk and the issue of true sale? Majority of the Sukuk in the market are asset-based, based on the guarantee by government, and a lot of critics are of the opinion they are not different from conventional bonds. I think we have already discussed that, but if you would like to add some comments on that, Professor Kabir.
Okay. Yes, we already have discussed, as Madina said, but there are also other problems. It's not only that it's not a true sale. There is also in the contract, it's called purchase undertaking. So that means at the end of the time period, you're going to buy back, or if there is a problem, buy back the asset at the original price. And that also violates the Sharia. You also have this top-up facilities that if there is a shortage, you give a loan. That also violates Sharia. You also have this bankruptcy remoteness. That means actually if there is a default, you as a Sukuk holder do not have access to the asset that you can sell the asset and get your money back. So the point that you have raised, my dear brother, there's just one issue. There are 3 or 4 other issues in each Sukuk transaction, majority of Sukuk transaction that I have seen. So we have a long way to go. But I want to emphasize one thing. Having I said all this thing, yes, you are trying to bring a new financial instrument in a world where riba or interest is the dominant force. So you have to fight against this riba-based system with a no riba-based system. So you first, what is happening right now, we are mimicking the industry. So we take a conventional product and we try to apply Sharia to make it in Islamic. So mimicking was probably necessary at the early stage of the industry in order to develop, to make a footprint. But we really need to get out of this mimicking industry and go to the basic value proposition of Islamic finance classical Islamic financial contracts, nominate contract, and come up with all the techniques that you talk about, artificial intelligence. From the classical contract, you do permutation and combination, come up with new contract, which keeps the original intent of the Sharia into the structure. And finally, you also have to look at the demand. You know, if you look at the Muslim world, for aside from the rest of the world, if you just simply look at the Muslim world, 15 to 30 years old is about 40% of the population. This population need a job. They need an education. How can Islamic finance can help them, you know, to get this education? Let's say you are an engineering graduate, you have a very brilliant idea, but you don't have money. Now, Islamic finance has to come up with a new product so that it can provide you the financing in Islamic way so that we can bring the best out of you, and that is helpful to the economy, that benefits everyone. So we have to get out of this mimicking financial engineering, reverse financial engineering, to a value-based Islamic nominate contract using different technique, using modern technology to the consumer and customer demand. If we cannot do this way, this Islamic finance is going to lose its luster, appeal. And I'm afraid that we do not lose it. That's why we need everyone to understand, to follow it, even if it's a small scale. You know, let me conclude with a statement I'm paraphrasing by Taqi Usmani. He said it very emphatically. Look, I mean, we can't simply just sell our soul to the credit rating agency, because we are doing all this thing, purchase undertaking, no real sale, banker's remoteness, in order to please the credit rating agency so that we get a better rating. We really should stop doing it. We have to really, if it is a risky, let it be risky. And the risk and return, this combination trade-off, less that basic concept or fundamental truth, our risk and return comes into play. And that is also the essence of Islamic finance. No pain, no gain. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Kabir. We have exhausted our time. Already we have run out of time. And we would like to thank you very much for your very interesting and very informative and relevant lecture, and giving you time to answer the questions. We really hope to cooperate with you in the future, and we would like to organize other events with you devoted to Islamic finance and other related issues. And we would like to invite everyone who is interested to do research on Islamic finance and the food security issues, because we are very pleased to hear that Professor Kabir during this lecture stresses the importance of the real life relevance of Islamic finance and the real benefit it can bring to the real people. This is exactly what we're trying to do within our Agrofinmost project, and trying to unite Islamic finance in principles and instruments and food security issues in the world. I would like to ask every participant to fill in the feedback form, which is in the chat, and I'll send it one time again. We thank you all for that you are with us during all this 1 hour and a half and more. Based on the filling out the form, we will send you the slides and the link to the video. The seminar is being recorded, and we will prepare the video version of the seminar so that it would be available for the audience, for the broader audience. Professor Kabir, thank you so much, and really hope to see you again and again, and sometime later in Russia to see you, not online but offline.
Inshallah. And thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to share whatever little I know about Islamic finance to the audience. And have a very good day. It's 9:30 almost in New Orleans, and very late in Russia, probably 7:30, right? Or 9:30?
It's almost 6, so it's not that
almost
late.
6 o'clock.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very good time.
So it's a dinner time for you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, and have a good day.
You too. Good day to everyone. And Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Bless you. Thank you.